Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining another episode of the Educational Leadership Podcast. We have another very special guest. And before we introduce our guest, we want to give a shout out to our co-host, Corinne French.
Yay, I can't wait to get started today.
Yes, very excited. And our sponsor, Ideal Impact. Ideal Impact's given hundreds of millions of dollars in funding to public ed, $700 million to over 180 districts in Texas, I think is the latest stats that I've heard. So thank you to our sponsor as well. And our guest today, Superintendent Goss. Superintendent Goss, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, sir. No problem. Glad to be here.
Yes, very exciting. And before we kick things off, could you share a little bit about your background?
Sure. Well, I am entering my 22nd year in education. I taught in a rural school, Boles ISD, BOLES, and we are east of Dallas, about in 45 minutes, 50 minutes, given the day of traffic. But I taught here, and then I moved to the Metroplex and taught there for a handful of years. Came back to my beginning district in rural Texas, and I was a principal for 12 years. I did exit being in the principal role for about 5 years, and I did consulting through a rural co-op. I served 9 districts, dealing with federal programs, finance, just things that an assistant superintendent might do in a bigger district, but would visit these schools twice a month to help them maintain compliance. So I did that for 5 years. And then I came back to Boles again, and I've been back for 4 years as superintendent. And we're a 2A school. We have 550 students today. We've grown about 100 students since COVID. We lost quite a few kiddos, and that is due to our unique situation. We are only 9 square miles in actual property and of our district boundaries. Our claim to fame is we are actually the poorest school district in the state of Texas based on wealth per student. We only raise about $300,000 a year this year in property taxes, and so we're heavily dependent on state aid. So you're probably asking me, do I have 550 kids in my district boundaries? No, because much of it's under a nearby lake, our property, but we accept transfers. Currently, we have 300 and right at 400 students are transfers from 17 districts.
Wow.
We are, again, on an application-based system, and we're at capacity now. We probably could not grow any more, a handful here and there in different grades. But I had a great job consulting, loved my job, but I have 5 children, 5 girls, and 2 are in their 20s. And then I have a second set of children that are 3 and 4 years old from a second marriage. And so I had a calling one day that I was doing a good job in my job, but what was I giving back really to public ed? I mean, I was consulting, but I wanted to get back to where my kids were going to go to school, because I want to continue supporting public education and providing a great environment for our rural schools. And that is kind of our passion here, is providing world-class opportunities in a rural environment, because that's difficult to do sometimes when you have no money, but we reach out and we have lots of community partners, and we're able to do lots of things in a rural environment that maybe we weren't able to do before. But that is our passion, is to provide those opportunities while maintaining a small school.
Very cool.
That is so powerful. I served on a rural board for 10 years, and as you're talking, I'm just thinking how important it is for us to make sure we have that you said world-class education in that rural space. That is so important, because to some families, that very small community is very important, and people move back to that for a reason. We have to have schools that can support really a global students leaving and go into a global the workforce, but having that community. So I really appreciate that. I always, for women, for people, superintendents who are female, identify as female or women, I always want to know if you thought you'd be in this position when you were a teacher.
No.
Would you believe it if someone told you we're going to consult and have such a strong leadership role? So why
Yeah.
wouldn't you have believed that? Can you talk about that a little?
I mean, and to this day, and I think if you even ask other female superintendents, it's kind of like that imposter syndrome. It's like, am I really good enough? Am I really smart enough? Do I really have the skills to lead a school district? And I know I do. My background's in finance, and so I know I have skills, but I surround myself with other good people to help me in my deficiencies. So, but I don't know. I think that I wasn't surrounded by strong women growing up or during my school. I just think that you see male figures in most of those administrative positions. So didn't see myself doing this at all, but it just kind of fell into place very nicely because I did have my former superintendent at this district, very supportive, very driven, very, giving back and always wanting to provide us opportunities. And so he's probably one of the reasons that I am where I am today, because he constantly told me, you can do this.
Yeah. So I'm kind of wondering, like, it's that mentoring, maybe in the tapping of saying, like, even if we know we have the skills, we have the educational background, but someone else saying, no, I see you doing this, and putting you in that place to succeed. Yeah.
Because on any given day, I think somebody's doing this better than I am, but I'm hanging in there. So
It's funny. It's interesting. It's not really funny. So Superintendent Strickland, we interviewed him.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying now, like, connects to what we talked about on the last podcast, and his interview is going to come out here in a couple of weeks. But we were just talking about mentors and belief and the power of someone else believing in you, and like you can have all the education in the world and you can know that, hey, why are they doing this and I can't do this, and I don't know, just there, you still have a little bit of doubt though, right? Unless you've done it or somebody else has given you that kind of support.
Sure.
So it's so powerful.
We have a great network though. That's funny. I mean, you are talking about Jeremy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. He and I went to high school together. Small world.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yes.
Funny.
And it's funny. We just, that network that you create, he and I just talked 2 days ago through some of the issues that he's facing or trying to jump, into with the 4-day. And so our district was one of 2 in our county that started the 4-day 3 years ago. And so I was talking to Jeremy on the phone. And so a network, we have a very good one in this area of superintendents. And so we always help each other out.
I noticed that when I was a trustee, how often my superintendent communicated with other superintendents. And someone even asked at a training at Region 11, it was a new trustee, and it was kind of in the middle of this big issue we've been through the last couple of years. It was a hot topic conversation, heated. And when someone asked the trainer if superintendents happen to talk to each other ever, and I almost laughed out loud. Like,
yes,
you would never do this work
right.
without that network.
I will say though, 10 years ago, that there was competition, and so there wasn't as much talk amongst us as there is now. I think that we depend on one another now because we've just seen so many changes and so many curveballs sent our way that we have to lean on each other. And so I think it's just more of a sense of collaboration rather than competitiveness.
I see that too. And then I also wonder if, now that we can pop on a Zoom, I mean, we're doing a podcast now if we tried to visit with you at a conference, or we all tried to get together, it's a little harder, but now we can pop on Zoom, you can take a call. And I mean, even 10 years ago, we might not have been as comfortable. Obviously we weren't probably on Zoom. There might've been some platforms, but I think with technology, it's making a little bit of those connections stronger and faster. So I can see that for sure. But I do understand the competition thing, because we're all in we're trying to get money from the same place.
Yeah, for sure.
So Will you talk about that a little? You mentioned you have to have partnerships if you aren't getting the money that other students or other districts are getting.
That was my question too. 'Cause
Okay,
like,
yeah. So
if you have different districts that are, you have transfer students, like how did, like, that's just interesting. How does that work?
Well, in Boles has always been, we're one of the first school districts to start taking transfers. Actually, legislation had to be written in order for that to happen. And my former superintendent was huge into that initiative, and he helped to get that legislation passed to accept transfers. And so we are heavily dependent upon that, or we would not generate ADA to support our staff's out. I mean, just at the bare minimum, our salaries and then everything else. And so we have to be very cognizant of how those numbers are looking and making sure that we're still providing a place where people want to be, because without our transfer students, our district wouldn't be able to financially afford what we have. And we have great facilities and staff, but the draw is being part of a smaller school in the middle of maybe, larger districts. And so we don't, again, we are majority based on transfers, and we take, but one other thing to note, we have a children's home that is within our district boundaries too. So.
oh, wow.
Yeah, that is very cool. So transfers, your district must have something unique that attracts these students from all these different areas.
Well, we think we do. We have, and I'm not knocking bigger districts at all. I've taught in a larger district, but sometimes there are teachers that want to come to a smaller place where their class sizes are small. Some don't like it because we don't have all the things there are to offer. We don't have a baseball field. We don't have a lot of the things that bigger districts are able to offer, but we work at it. And still, for instance, in CTE, we're so proud that we've been able to create 6 programs of study in our small district, and that's huge.
That
and
is.
So little things like that, where we can be creative and innovative, I think that is a draw to parents. And sometimes it's just a matter of, this isn't working where I am for my kid. He or she needs a new environment and a new place to get started. And so sometimes that's the draw for a transfer student.
This is
Not
so
to say
cool.
we don't have problems, just like any other district. It's just not be a different perspective and like a new start. So we have a lot of that.
Yeah, this is interesting because we've talked to, it seems like every district has its own personality or whatever it's some district. We talked to one district and they had this virtual school, this big virtual school that they had, and you all had these transfer students, which is very unique. With that, your background and your situation currently with the unique attributes of your district, what are you passionate about right now in public ed?
Just spreading the good word. We are, I think our political climate right now has created a mistrust in public ed. And I think that I'm passionate about spreading the good word of what we are doing, because we're doing great things. And sometimes in the media, our attention is drawn to the bad things. And I just invite anyone, to take a step onto a public school campus and see all the wonderful things that are happening, and to, downgrade that or attack that. It's very, that's hard to accept. And so I think that we are all passionate, or trying to be passionate, about public ed and making partnerships and making sure that the community understands what we are doing, because I am afraid that if we don't get if our political climate doesn't change, public ed can't remain under attack. I mean, I don't know how we continue to do the jobs that we do when sometimes those days are tough.
They are. I'm in public ed in my day job, and then served as a trustee, and I don't know a lot of other professions that have to continually prove their worth and do such great work at the same time. Like,
It's heartbreaking. It is hard.
And yet it's the work of when you are developing humans, it can't be put into a formula, but yet that's how we still have to receive state aid. We still, so there are so many formulas. I don't understand. I think I kind of understand Texas public school finance, definitely better than the average person, but it still doesn't totally make sense when we have such wealth in the state of Texas. So there's a big disconnect, but what people do, what teachers are doing and superintendents and any professional and paraprofessional in the districts, what they do with what they have, it's literally a miracle every day. And I think the same thing. If people could just go in and see it, you'll walk away and think, wow, I can. And so I thank you for being our guest, because I think that's one of the important things is superintendents are doing such amazing work.
Yeah.
And when you take a little bit of time out of your day, we know it's, I don't even like the word busy, because I think busy is almost like you're just not doing, but you're committed to so many other things during the day. And your priorities are large, and you have humans at stake. So
Yes, absolutely.
we're really thankful for the work that you're doing.
Sure.
And yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, we're trying to make our little dent in this public education universe, if you will, and share the good things that are happening. There's so many good things, and every district's unique. And Superintendent Goss, you touched on a point earlier with some of the things that are being spread through the media or wherever. And I think as human beings, we start looking for patterns, and if we see something consistent enough, we're like, we form these conclusions without making the effort to really understand on our own and have these kinds of conversations. So we're excited to share this interview and what you have going on at your district. And it's just exciting the connections that we're forming and the the relationships we're building with some of these districts as well. And so Corinne, you typically, I'll ask the last question, Corinne.
Okay.
Do you have
I do. So my original dissertation was studying women who were studying to superintendent, and I ended up switching, and I'm going to study now trustees. But I feel like there's something that we could be doing a little differently when women are in college deciding to be teachers. So if I get to mentor some of those young women on my campus, if you have a piece of advice to people going into the field, it can be male or female, but maybe, kind of hinting towards those young teachers.
Well, and we've done, again, that's what I was also going to mention, we are passionate about being innovative, but making sure that we're being innovative where it's needed. And we created this year a teaching and learning pathway at our small school. And so we would have never thought to do this or been able to because we don't have the manpower, the staff. But it was very heavy on our hearts, my administrators and myself, to do something to help this massive teacher shortage. And so we have created a pathway here so that those kiddos can get into classrooms and see what teaching is all about and support them through that. And then Texas A&M up the road in Commerce has a pathway now for it's a different way of reaching your teacher certification. But we feel it's very important to get those kids that we're sending in the classroom. And that would be my recommendation to anyone going is, if you're not going to do traditional student teaching, then at least get in there and sub or work in an after school program or something that where you are in the thick of it with kids, because I think that is a huge disservice to our brand new teachers, that they're not getting the in-class training. And when we throw someone in there, such as myself, my first year teaching, I had never stepped foot in a classroom. I did an alternative route, and I feel like I went home and cried most days, because I had never seen the expectations that were put on me without, adequate training. So for anyone going to education, I think that you just need to make sure that you've gotten yourself out there to experience what it's going to look like. My own daughter is going into teaching. She finishes in a semester. And that was my only requirement. You do traditional student teaching, plus you're going to work our ACE after school program, because if you can make it an ACE where those kids are done at the end of the day and still provide enrichment activities for those kids, you're going to have it made. You know, you are going to understand the, and that's another thing about teaching. People don't understand how exhausting it is, and it is tiresome, but you just get into that groove of providing for students. And so it's, but there's, no other profession that can be compared.
They'll fall in love. I mean, it'll be
Yes.
exhausting, but they'll fall in
Yes,
love.
yes.
They will fall in love with the classroom. They really will. Yeah.
Yes, that's a great point. I mean, even parents getting involved, because I served as a watchdog at my daughter's school
Yay.
recently. Yeah, that was an eye-opening experience. It was, I had had about 50 kindergartners run, like, what do they want me to go
Do you have a badge?
come up with some sort of, like, I don't know, tag, or it was it's funny though, kindergarten. So I got one daughter in kindergarten, another one in third grade, and of course third grade they're all like, oh, I'm cool, don't talk to me, I'm cool, hey dad, don't embarrass me. Okay, anyways, don't want to go off on a tangent here. Last question. This is the podcast challenge question.
Oh gosh.
All right.
You will succeed. I know you will.
Yes. Who in public education would you recommend come on and share their story like you did today?
Oh, okay. Let's see. Janae Carter.
Janae Carter.
She's at Lone Oak.
Okay, we will reach out to her and we'll get her story on here. Okay, well, I know you're super busy and we're running short on time here. Just want to thank you again for being part of the podcast today. And before we close out, just want to give a last shout out to our sponsor, I Do Impact, who's giving hundreds of millions of dollars in funding to public ed, over $700 million, over 180 districts in Texas. So reach out to I Do Impact if you need funding. And by the way, it doesn't involve the government or taxpayers or any of that stuff. So, and it's zero out of pocket to a district. So if you need funding, that's one way to get funding. And for our listeners, thank you for tuning in to the Educational Leadership Podcast.